Everyone can still see the screen? All right, great. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Tracy, for that introduction. It's very good. I can tell that you lead many of our marketing initiatives. So you talked it up quite well. As Tracy said, I dedicated most of my career to elder care. I started working at Erickson, well, at the time was only called Charlestown, in 1989, waiting tables in high school, and never left elder care after that. Erickson was exceptional at growing their leadership folks from within, and 14 years in operations, leading some very difficult teams in dining services. If anyone's ever worked in dining services, you know that you cannot please 3,000 grandmothers who make meatloaf better than everyone else on the planet. So 14 years in food service and housekeeping and customer service and security and all operations, and then transitioned around 2003 to human resources and went to Silver Spring and helped open up Riderwood. And when I started, we had about 37 employees. And when I left, before I came to Stella, we had 1,400 employees. So we had an HR team that really recruited tremendously to build that campus out. And it is still the largest CCRC retirement community in the country. So it's huge. But I came to Stella. Monday is my anniversary, 11 years on Monday. It's easy to remember because it's also my twin's birthday. So I can always remember my anniversary date because it's the day my children were born. And started as the Senior Vice President of Human Resources. And it's interesting, at Stella, it's been led by the Sisters of Mercy, and the bricks were laid here by two sisters, in particular, Sister Lewis Mary Battle, who passed away several years ago, and Sister Karen McNally, who retired 2.5 years ago after 50 years of service. So when we talk about dealing with employees and retention and keeping the good ones, how often are we giving out 50-year service pins these days? And at Stella Maris, we just gave out another one last week. So it's so interesting to see this transition of what's important to people. We have really opposite ends of the spectrum here at Stella, and our organization is almost 70 years old, owned and operated by Mercy Health Services, which is getting ready to hit their 150th anniversary. But it's interesting to see the perspective. We either have staff that have been here for 30 years or longer, or we have staff that have been here 30 seconds. It's like the in-between is getting really hard to get good data on because the turnover has become increasingly high since the pandemic. So today I'm talking about dealing with difficult employees and preparing for greater success. I'm sort of positioning this presentation from an HR perspective, but as Tracy's heard me say over the last couple of years of she and I working together, everyone in your organization is an HR professional and everyone in your organization is a marketing professional. So everyone should be talking positively about their organization and everyone should be trying to recruit for their organization. When I tell GNAs that, they laugh at me and I say, well, it only helps you if you tell your friends about working at Stella Maris. So you can certainly be a marketing person for your organization. Throughout the presentation, I have some pause points to check in and ask questions because these types of things, particularly when you can't read the room because we're on a virtual conference here, it's hard to tell when people want to say something because you can't read a room and you can't read the Zoom. So I'll stop periodically and please just talk and interrupt me. It's no social graces here virtually for me. I'd rather have the dialogue. To me, meaningful training is about the engagement between the presenter and the people in the room. And a lot of times I just came out of the HFAM session this week, 4 days of many presentations. And sometimes you go to a presentation, you may only get one sentence or one quote or one piece of data that was really meaningful to you, but it was worthwhile. And so today I'm probably not going to share a lot that you don't already know. And sometimes just reframing it and talking amongst colleagues helps you think of things you didn't think about yesterday. And it just re-energizes you to address certain situations. So that's my approach to training. If you get one quote or one piece of data or one nugget or regenerate some ideas today and you walk away going, I heard that and I didn't think about that for a while, then I think we've had a good time together. There is no magic trick these days with recruiting and retaining staff. I don't have a presentation full of pie in the sky ideas. I think the best approach to leadership is a genuine approach and to be authentic. And we'll talk a little bit about that throughout the presentation. So from an introduction standpoint, I thought we'd go through a couple things today, defining the situation right now with our labor shortage. Again, you know a lot of this, but let's just quickly put it in the forefront, identifying the concerns we're having with our staff right now. I mean, let's be frank about it. From a long-term care perspective, a home-based community perspective, and elder care in general, we've had a nursing crisis for a long time. The pandemic has only exacerbated that situation, right? No one goes to nursing school going, one day I'm going to take care of seniors. So we know that in long-term care, we are the least glamorous of all the healthcare entities out there, and that's okay. And a lot of times it's great to leverage the support of the burnt out ICU nurse and the retiring nurse who wants to change a pace. Although we have found in the last 19 to 20 months, pace is subjective to the pandemic. So even in long-term care, the pace now is completely different than it was even two years ago. So let's talk about our concerns with staff. Let's put it out there. Let's vent about it, and let's see how we can problem solve it. Dealing with difficult employees, it's just a reality of leadership. It's happening. It happens in HR. It happens with leaders. It happens amongst teams and peers. So let's talk about when to hold them, or as Kenny Rogers would say, when to fold them, but I put in hold them instead, and know when to run. Not walk away, but run. You know, HR is famous for saying fire fast, right? So we'll talk about that a little bit more detail. And then a couple of retention strategies that are just sage advice throughout time, getting back to that authentic leadership piece, and then partnering for the greater good, which will hopefully lead you to some bench strength. But first, if you can't go online or read the paper right now, read the paper, that's funny. Go online and read the news and not know that we have a national labor shortage. So we've had a nursing crisis for a decade and a half. And then that's even worse for long-term care, as I said. And now we have a labor shortage. In addition to nursing crisis, you can't find a housekeeper. So this is kind of new territory for many of us, because from an HR perspective, we've never really had a huge issue finding GNAs, CNAs, although we know in Maryland it's GNA for long-term care, but for your private duty sector and your home-based community services. We've not really had a huge problem finding the entry-level housekeeper, the entry-level security officer, the entry-level dining worker, and now we're competing with things that we've never competed with before. Amazon, McDonald's, I mean, outrageous. And when you talk to employees about total rewards and say, we are paying $15 an hour. Well, with Amazon, I also get this benefit. Well, what about your benefits, your health insurance? It's shocking to me how many employees will say to me, I don't care about that stuff. They don't care about total rewards anymore. So selling the benefit package and selling the 401k match, 403b match is not as relevant today as it was just 5 years ago. So how do you work around those dynamics? Because everything for the entry-level employee and the frontline employee right now is about the wages. The reality is this: we've had generous pandemic unemployment benefits that have not helped with the labor shortage. We've had childcare and school closing issues. This was huge for us in healthcare, right? How many clinicians, how many GNAs, CNAs, CMAs, nurses base their flexible schedule that we've been offering now for eons because we're trying to be out of the box to deal with the nursing shortage? How many clinicians had to say, I have to go flex now because schools are closed. And now that schools are closed, I can't do all this. That was huge for a lot of healthcare providers. Unanticipated retirements. That's been huge. I read online 2 days ago in preparation for this session today that hundreds of thousands of people that were not thinking about retirement decided to not wait till 67 and now retire at 64. And what that's done to the labor shortage. It's been tremendous. People reassessing their value. I am compromised. I didn't mind working in long-term care or nursing before, but now I have to think about my asthma. Now I have to think about what I'm bringing home to my loved one because, I'm a tweener. I got kids in school and I've got elder parents I'm taking care of. People are reassessing their human value and whether or not work is worth it. And that's a huge piece. And then the fear factor. All of these things, your unemployment benefits from the state, which did end recently in the last few months, the child care issue, the unanticipated retirements, the people reassessing their value and fear all have sort of exacerbated the labor shortage in the last 20 months. It's hard to believe we've been working through the pandemic for that long. Time flies. Time flies when you're having fun, but as a previous boss once said to me, time flies when you're stuck in a psychotic episode, which certainly in some way the pandemic has felt like. So all of these are not helping the cause. Let's not forget about the healthcare industry played as well. Between 2000 and 2030, the number of people in the United States over the age of 65 is expected to double. 10,000 people turn 65 a day in this country right now. 10,000 people a day. The American Association, AACN, points to data that suggests that the country will need more than 200,000 new nurses a year to handle the amount of people that will be aging against needing significant levels of healthcare. And that doesn't even speak to what we're dealing with in a long-term care setting with regards to aides, dining, housekeeping, etc. So all these things combined make it very clear for leadership that retention of your staff is tremendously important and has to be a top priority. All the things that HR has been saying over the years and leadership folks have scoffed at, those HR people and that HR thing, and that's all coming to really true fruition right now as we're handling the pandemic combined with already nursing shortages. So what do you do with all that? And then this week in the HFAM conference, I learned that 40,000 healthcare practitioners, and that's everything from the CNA all the way up to the PA. So the CNA, the nurse, physicians, 40,000 people with licenses in the state of Maryland did not renew in the last year. 40,000 people took themselves out of the healthcare game in the last year in the state of Maryland. That is statistically significant. There are 89,000 registered nurses in the state of Maryland. And I'm not saying the 40,000 were all nurses, but I'm saying it doesn't matter. 40,000 clinicians in the state of Maryland decided not to renew their license. These aren't the people that were begging and pleading the Maryland Board of Nursing to reopen and get moving. Let's go, let's go, let's go, government agencies. We're ready with our license. These are people that willingly decided not to go back into the healthcare arena. So again, that doesn't support the cause when we're talking about retention and narrowing the gap of our staffing crisis. So any other theories or thoughts or facts regarding the labor shortage that you've seen or experienced that you want to talk about? I thought this would be a good pause point.
Crystal, I'm seeing some comments about just how staggering those numbers are. Mm-hmm. How shocking it is to see that. I didn't realize it was 40,000.
Well, I don't have an article to plug in to fact check that, but it was one of the three of the, gosh, I probably attended 5 sessions a day over the course of 3.5 days. 3 of the sessions I attended were specifically on staffing shortages. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the things that was discussed by Joe DeMattis, who's the president of HFAM, as you all know. There's 40,000 clinicians in the state of Maryland not renewing their license. And it is staggering. Mm. So when we get to talking about retention, who are we talking about retaining? So clearly our star performers. I mean, that's a no-brainer. A term that HR has used for decades is the steady Eddie. The steady Eddie runs your company, and that makes up the majority of your staff. I show up, I do the job, I'm not lighting fires, the world's not lit on fire because I'm here, but you get to keep admitting patients, you get to keep clean floors and, some level of food being put in front of patients. Your steady eddies, you need these people. This makes up the majority of your, on a bell curve, your steady eddies are right in the middle. They're the highest peak of your employee pool. Your star performers are pretty low. Your difficult employees are pretty low. Although I would venture to say without data that difficult employee piece is going up in the environment we're working in right now. And then do we want to retain our difficult employees? Are our difficult employees difficult because they're dealing with pandemic stress? Yes. Yes, that's a big part of it. We need to separate our difficult employees who challenge us and are difficult now. Some of the time before I was an ED, when I was leading HR, one of the things I would say to a manager if they came to me and said, I got a difficult employee. They're horrible. I don't know what's going on, but something's different. And then you, as an HR person, you go into your little HR system and you pull them up and you're like, wow, Sally's been here for 8 years. Sally has one write-up in her file for 8 years for attendance. Sally's freaking an angel in the perspective of HR. One write-up in 8 years for attendance. Who cares about that, right? You wish that was your problem these days. And you start going to the manager and saying, let's talk more about Sally. So Sally's been difficult lately. Let's try to figure out why Sally's difficult now, because for 8 years and 2 months, Sally has had one write-up and clearly been someone that we've relied on and count on. And then you start to talk and you meet with Sally and you realize Sally's going through a divorce, or you realize Sally's got a child that has ADHD that's starting to, or there's been other life changes. And so that's not a difficult employee. That's an employee that's hit a roadblock. So we need to put that aside. That's someone we need to coach back to center. And then you have difficult employees that challenge you. They've got ideas and they're going to tell you. And we'll get into that a little bit more in a second. When we're talking about difficult employees, we're talking about the people that fall into these categories. And look, you could put multiple branches on this, but they're disruptive. They gossip, so they're poisonous to your team. They have bullying behaviors, my way or the highway. When you walk into the office, everyone's on pins and needles because, we don't want to pick on Sally, but Sally's having a bad day and everyone has to know about it. They lack the ability to be civil to others. And well, first of all, that's not good for your mission. It's not good for your team. They're insubordinate. When I first got to Stella Maris, it was oddly bizarre to me how many managers were dealing with insubordinate behavior and not thinking they could do anything about it. Well, nothing in the policy talks about Sarah just walking away from me. Okay, policies are written to guide your management. It is not the be all end all. All right. Now, I know that's counterproductive to a lot of us in healthcare because if it's a reg, it's a little different. But policies are for people and people are gray. They're not black and white. So just because the policy doesn't call out employee walked away from manager on this date and time doesn't mean the behavior is not insubordinate, and really coaching our leadership here to understand what insubordination actually means. That's a big one. That could be disruptive. That ties into all these other things and not showing up. And I'm not talking about the person that calls out 5 times a year. Honestly, nowadays, if that was our only problem, we'd be in a great situation. I'm talking about not showing up mentally, not showing up physically. I am talking about attendance too. And if they are present, that it's sometimes better if they're not there for the team. The team feels more at ease and can function better when they're not there. Not showing up. Our turnover rate at Stella has increased pretty exponentially over the last 20 months. In general, nationally, since the pandemic hit, turnover numbers for healthcare organizations has increased 15%. So if you were an organization where your turnover was 40% a year, you're now at 55. If you were at 70%, which would be catastrophic almost, now you're at 85% turnover. So these are numbers that compete with like fast food service. So 15% since the pandemic started. So that's pretty catastrophic. At Stella, our number one term reason for the last 2 years has been attendance related. And I'm not talking about counting days on a schedule. I'm talking about no call, no shows, and quit without notice, and job abandonment. I'm talking the big ones, the big categories that you go to unemployment hearings and argue and fight. I'm not talking she had 12 absences in 6 months. Not showing up is huge. And part of the reason that's happening so catastrophically, right? And maybe we're exempt, but I don't think if I ask the group, I think a lot of people would say, yes, attendance is a problem. It's interesting to see this occur, because the reason it can happen right now for a lot of clinicians, and particularly our GNAs, is because agencies are grabbing them up and offering them $5 and $6 more an hour, minus benefits, because they don't offer that, and competing with us. We will line up 5 and 6 interviews for GNAs, and we will be thankful that 2 showed up. And when we go back and unpeel the onion and try to track down why didn't the other 6 show up, oh, I got called to do an agency thing, or I got another offer while I was driving to Stella. I mean, these things are just insane, and it's stuff we've never experienced before. And I would venture to say we're not exempt in that category. So we're going to get a little bit more into the challenging employee topic. Sometimes those who challenge you the most teach you the best. I firmly believe this. I have story after story of people that have worked for me in the past that have challenged me, and in my younger years, put me in tears sometimes, coming up in an environment where I was managing so many people at 20, 21, and 22 years old. It was very easy to be at the brunt of, you don't know what you're talking about, kid. So, and sometimes that was accurate, and people challenged me, which made me better. Sometimes leadership, however, doesn't like to be challenged. It's my way or the highway. It's what I say goes. If you don't allow people to push you, then you'll never get from good to great. And that's just the bottom line. I had someone tell me here at Stella when I first started here that they really thought I was going to make a great impact on things because of my leadership style and how I approached care for the caregiver. But sometimes when I'm managing my immediate team, that my style could be parental. And that I took that to heart, because I thought, wow, I do have to switch gears from being in mom mode to being in management mode. And what did that mean to be parental? And when I first heard it kind of hit me in the gut a little bit, because here I am going up in front of leadership, talking about leadership styles and appropriate approach. And yet someone on my immediate team of, 9 people is telling me, you can be parental. So I needed to understand that more. And I let it sit and breathe versus react to it. And I went back to this individual 3 or 4 days later, and I said, I need you to help me with this, because I don't want to be perceived that way, but I need to understand it through example so I can really relate it. And some of the things this individual shared, I agreed with. I was like, I can see it that way. Some I didn't. Me emailing you to ask you if this thing is in process or done is accountability. It's not parental. They thought it was parental. However, in meetings, if I was asking for feedback and then trying to steer it another direction, was I trying to get my way or my voice heard louder without proper vetting out? And there were some things that I really took to heart. That person challenged me, but that person made me a better vice president of HR at the time, to be honest with you. And really, that person doesn't work for me anymore. They left to take a really amazing job in Fairfax. They moved out of state, and still to this day asks me to do her references for various things. So it built our relationship too, because she was so pleased that I didn't just go on the defense with that. So challenging employees have to really be looked at carefully. We don't want to throw challenging employee and difficult employee always in the same bucket. It's not always the same. The metrics you should be assessing ongoingly in your organizations, and if you're supporting other organizations, obviously turnover, although I'm going to tell you, this is one of the pie in the sky things. It's skewed right now. You're dealing with a pandemic. And as I recently said in our leadership meeting here, and Tracy knows this, I'm tired of COVID being the #1 agenda item on every meeting we go to. It has, at some point, while COVID is not in the rearview mirror, it cannot be what we work towards, what we're working over, and what we're working ahead of. We have to move with COVID. COVID has to become like every other thing we deal with in healthcare, where we move with the flu season, we move with the CMI rating, we move with our reimbursement rates from the state, which we don't always agree with. We move with staffing challenges. We now move with the pandemic. Because the longer we just go, oh, because of COVID, what's in the way becomes the way. And I'm sure some of you have heard that quote before. It's an excellent quote, and it's 100% correct. So some of this is a little pie in the sky. Turnover, you're going to hear every HR person talk about turnover is a huge metrics. We also like to say things like people don't leave their company, they leave their boss. And you've probably been hearing that forever. It's in every leadership book out there. But you still have to know your data. Data drives your ability to problem solve some things. So you have to know your turnover rate. You have to know the story of your organization, of where you were and where you're headed. I don't like to go into any meetings with our corporate, with Mercy, or with the board, or even my advisory board, without knowing right in the minute what my turnover rate is. It's very important. Employee engagement is huge. I've heard a lot of different kerfuffles with this in the last 2 years. Why would we do an employee survey? We know everyone's not happy because of the pandemic. Why would we do a survey? You do the survey so you have a starting point. Otherwise, it's all anecdotal. It's not enough. Always remember that the squeaky wheel gets the grease too. And while you may have had some difficult employees and complainers, you've also had some steady eddies and some star performers that have stayed. So the employment engagement survey will really help you determine how much grease that squeaky wheel is going to need. So do 40% of my employees think this that took the survey, or do 10% think this? And now I need to prioritize this. Employment engagement is important, and it's on our agenda to have a survey here within the next 6 months. It's been a year and a half since we had one. Now, I don't think you should over-survey staff either, because here's what your employees will say. We just did this and nothing has changed. So if you haven't put something in place that demonstrates your numbers should change, don't do another survey just so they can tell you the same thing again, because your participation rate will go from 70% are participating in a survey to 25% participating in a survey, because nothing is changing in the middle. So don't over-survey people either, but some form of a metric on engagement is important. No more than a year, and no less. Don't do it more than a year, meaning don't do 3 surveys in a year, and don't wait 3 years to do a survey. So somewhere between 12 to 18 months is the right blend on getting some good employment engagement. Some companies will say, we can't afford this. We all know that when things are tight and revenue's not coming in, we start cutting, especially in nonprofits, right? That's what we're good at, counting paper clips. If we cut our office supply budget by $12,000, I mean, we start cutting things that almost are irrelevant. So I'm going to say you really can't afford not to do an employee survey. And there are some options out there through companies like NCR, which used to be My Interview, and some others that are very affordable now. NCR does an employee engagement survey for exit interviewing, 90-day surveys for new hires, and annual surveys, and 2 or 3 other things included in their package for about $5,000 a year. It's if you have an organization with, 4 or 5 to 1,000 or more employees, $5,000 a year is worth it for that kind of tool. Commitment to the organization is a huge metric, and that would come out of your engagement questions on your survey. That's the would you recommend, and those kind of questions. Job satisfaction comes out of that engagement. Productivity levels are huge too, right? So, and that's hard to measure right now when you're short staffed. So that can be one that is a nice to have, but maybe not a must have. Very critical for your home-based community business lines though, right? If you've got nurses in the field who, you're paying on an exempt salary, especially, and they're not meeting their weekly productivity quotas, that's a big problem. So if productivity goes down, that potentially is a really good gauge on how satisfied your employee is. Quality of work, of course, and that whole attendance piece, when people don't show up, that's who are they not showing up for and why. So I already said some of that could be that they're working for agencies. Some of it could be just I'm burnt out on the pandemic in general. I feel really cathartic about the whole thing. I don't want to come to work. And some of it can be, I don't care about you or my manager, so I'm not popping in anymore. 5 years ago, that was a huge metric for human resources divisions to look at, your absentee rate, because that really spoke volumes about someone's commitment to the organization. please make sure you're partnering with your HR entities. That's really important. I know a lot of the companies that are involved with GAIN are smaller. They don't have all these resources, but this is why this kind of work group is important for problem solving, for sharing ideas, for venting. I belong to several committees as well, and sometimes just getting together for coffee and talking about what I'm dealing with is helpful. So just making sure you have someone to talk about staff concerns with is huge. And there are a lot of consulting groups out there too that do HR work that are excellent. HR team out of Columbia is really good consulting group. They're just big enough in the state of Maryland to kind of be a force to reckon with. We are one of their clients, so I can tell you they've done healthcare work. They do some salary survey analytics for us. Mercy's handling some of that now that we're partnering with them more, but that's a great company to think about partnering with. So knowing when to hold them, challenge the process positively. We've talked about that. Don't always look at difficult employees as difficult. And if they are being difficult, why now, not yesterday? In Sally's case of 8 years of steady Eddie employment, all of a sudden this is an issue. Are we really talking about performance management? Are we talking about possibly an employee who needs our support, right? Our social work hat to be on, which you all wear those hats. I know you do. If they are front facing and show up, you want to hold them. So these are your employees. When Tracy calls me and says, I need 4 people for photographs, I'm like, these are our go-to people. This is who I want to show the state of Maryland and the Baltimore metropolitan area. This is my person. Your front-facing people, your preceptors, the people you call on to do your training of new hires. They show up. They're there. They're committed to your mission. You definitely want to hold them. And this gets into some interesting dialogue too, because when they start talking about, I got another offer, if they're shining and sparkling in your organization, they're probably sparkling everywhere they go, and someone else is going to want them. So I'm going to tell you that invest whatever salary dollars you have into those people. We used to say, we don't counteroffer. We don't counteroffer. You almost have to counteroffer nowadays in some regards to keep the good ones. If your clients love them, hold them. This can be challenging. Have you ever had a family love an employee that was difficult for you? And you're like, oh, if I get one more letter about that employee who drives me crazy, I don't know what to do with that. You need to figure that out, because if they're making your clientele happy, that's huge, and harness that somehow. Figure out how to turn that relationship your manager's having with that individual around. They are the untitled leader. You know, these people who basically run the show behind the scenes don't want to be a manager, been very clear they don't want to be a manager, but people follow their lead. You need to figure out how to hold them. They're important. They're willing to learn. They go where needed. I don't want to be pulled today. I don't know if you all hear this a lot, but people don't want to be pulled. They don't want to be pulled. I want to stay on my neighborhood. I want to stay on my unit with my residents. We don't want to pull staff, but it's been very difficult not to pull staff nowadays. But the people that go where you need them without a lot of complaint are people we need to figure out how to keep. Versatile employees. And they advocate appropriately for their clients and their patients and their residents. So know when to walk away. I just put the list from the difficult employee screen right back in here. If they're disruptive, they're gossiping and they're poisonous to your organization, they're bully within your organization, they're not civil, they're insubordinate, they're not showing up. These are people we need to get on a plan to go. One of the really simple talking point metrics that we use here on the executive team is I just say, are they red, yellow, or green? If they're green, great. Let's leave those people alone. In fact, let's figure out how to use those people to build our bench strength. Let's give them more to do. If we need to give them more money, let's give them more to do. The green, leave alone. The steady eddies, great. Some of them could be yellow. If they're getting towards the yellow, meaning they're starting to have some performance issues, how do we pull them back? You want to focus on them, but don't die on the hill there either. The reds, these are your smaller number of employees that are in this category here. You got to work them out of the system, even if you're short-staffed, because they will be the reason other people that are great leave. So red, yellow, and green. And our operations team here has gotten very accustomed to me from my HR days, now ED days, saying, lay it out there for me, red, yellow, green, and verify that for me so I understand what we're talking about. It's a very important exercise to do talent review as well for your leadership folks. And we're going to talk about leadership in a second. because they can definitely be the elephant in the room. You need managers. You don't want to do your manager's job right now. We're already too lean, but if your manager's the reason you're losing staff, definitely got to deal with that too. If coaching is not working them and you can't get them back to center, you got to walk away from that employee and start the performance management process. And if they're attracting a crowd, this is the influencer you do not want. Influencers you don't want need to be out of your organization. They'll poison you if you're not careful. So this is the pie in the sky part. We all know this. Training, taking notice and listening, providing honest feedback, document and discipline, and follow up with staff. So this is how you address the challenging employees. You train, coach back to center. You take notice and listen. So you're really distinguishing challenging employee versus problem employee or difficult employee. We talked about that already. You provide honest feedback, or you hear honest feedback about yourself, which I told you about some of my experiences with that and having to listen about parental leadership a decade ago. Document and discipline. I know this is HR 101, right? I know HR, document, write it down, blah, blah, blah. Documentation doesn't have to be as cumbersome as people think. You know, early on here, I told managers, when you put a meeting on your Outlook calendar and you sit down, we keep picking on Sally, let's pick on someone else, John. You sit down with John and you meet with John, you put that note in the same calendar thing in Outlook, print that out and put it in your satellite file in your office. You just documented a counseling session. You don't have to make it cumbersome. At some point, yes, I will make you use the form and you'll have to put it on the form that gets submitted but on the onset, when you're coaching and you just want record, because I mean, let's face it, we all get forgetful in a day, just record it in your calendar, print it and stick it in your satellite file. And of note, just make sure if that person does go down the road of termination, that satellite file gets out of your office and to HR. Everything in your office is submissible in court. Everything, even the Post-it note where you wrote, she gets on my nerves. So do not write any notes about staff that you don't want to go into court. So, but the calendar thing is great because it's date, time, who you met with, printed, note in the file. Make documentation simple. So I'll pause here again and ask Tracy for a time check. Am I good on time? Because I can talk.
You are good. And we have a great question in the chat that I want to read aloud to you.
I'm sorry I'm missing those, but I can't, I'm just failing at multitasking.
It is all good. We are keeping an eye out for you. What if they are making your clients happy, but the remainder of your staff miserable?
Yeah, that's a great thing to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually am challenged by that right now. I have a situation where we take care of some services at Mercy Ridge. We share property with Mercy Ridge, and they're part of the Mercy entity. And some of you are familiar with Mercy Ridge, or they're not a full CCRC, but they're definitely independent living. They're not as large as an Erickson facility, but they have 200 plus residents of our apartments, and then they have assisted living. And we provide security services for them at Stella Maris. And we lost one of our key people over there that had been providing that services over there for about 6 or 7 years. And this person was very challenging to the leadership folks on this side of the campus. And so it was a yay, this person's gone. I'm glad they resigned from resounding from management over here. And now I'm hearing from the HR director across the street how influential and important this person was to the residents. What do you do with that? Well, this person resigned willingly. They weren't on a coaching plan or anything, and they were almost of retirement age. So it's not someone we're going to bring back, but it got me thinking about our mentality over here and how to balance that out, and the coaching I need to do with some of the staff here on our approach with that from customer service perspective, and make sure we're hearing people out before we alienate. Because I think part of the reason this person resigned is because they started feeling the alienation from the greater team at Stella, because everyone didn't agree with the approach. And that's really challenging, and it's an excellent question. I will tell you, if they're going to make the team so miserable that you start losing staff, which has a greater impact on your clients, you're going to have to deal with it from a performance standpoint. Retaining 12 clients over, and I'm just for easy math, right? So if I've got one employee who's dealing very closely with 10 clients and the clients love them, but I've got 8 employees also dealing with 10. Now I've got 80 clients impacted by the other 8 employees. Then just by sheer math, you say you're a detriment to the team that serves the greater good versus your 10. So you're going to have to kind of figure that out. And I would use some good metrics to do that. I would send HR in and do focus group meetings. I would remove leadership so it's benign. And I would put HR in there to talk to each of those team members to really ascertain what the issues are with that person wreaking havoc for the team. I would then try to determine if there could be some mediation and intervention between that person and the team members, if it's all of them or 2 of them, and mediate that to see if we can problem solve it before I said it's over. In mediation, a lot of times, it becomes very clear, if not always, but a lot of times, it becomes very clear if what you're hearing about this individual is really fact or fiction. And if it's fact, I think you'll know in mediation whether or not you really need to let that person go. So I put the greater good of the team first, because if you've got multiple people serving clients, then you're detriment to more clients than what the one person's dealing with is more important. Does that make sense? Yeah.
It does.
Yeah. I mean, and the same thing can happen in-house, right? If you have I terminated a GNA that was here for 30 years in my first year working here. It shocked everybody. But I found out on night shift that she was really quite a bully. And if we were hiring new staff, she was getting upset because they took away her overtime. I love it. We need staff. We're short staffed. You hired too many staff. Now I don't get overtime. Okay, what do you want, people? So you get this, it's like a conundrum of the masses, right? So this individual is bullying a lot of staff, new hires. And when you would go and investigate, the long-term staff would shut down because they saw time after time the director of nursing taking up for this person. Then we hired a new GNA, and not just new to Stella, but new GNA, like a 1.5 years, 2 years license. And she was a firecracker, and she wasn't having it. And she pushed the HR process to advocate for her, which she should have. And when we really investigated again and went back to the staff and said, okay, look, guys, we're hearing it again. Something's got to give here. And we, as people, just started opening up about this person, and we did terminate them. And yes, the Sister Karen, who was our chief administrative officer at the time, got letters from families because we terminated this GNA, and we had to work through it because it was either this GNA serving her assignment or clients of 8 or 10 versus 4 and 5 GNAs serving the rest of the unit, or the neighborhood. So you have to weigh your risk.
For some of our members, I was just going to mention, Crystal, for some of our members, if they're available and want to share, that are either they own their own business, they may not have, an HR expert or that bench strength to go to and say, how do I handle this? Does anyone have a situation that they like to share? This is a good time to do it. I know Amy recently had one.
Tracy, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
I just have a quick question, and I'm in the car. I apologize if there's feedback, but I'm listening. So at what point do I work at a practice where the HR professional is off-site, so there's really not that interaction. At what point in growing do you bring a HR professional on-site where they're actually a part of the team and interacting?
I mean, I'll give you an opinion. I know this is being recorded, so if it goes out to the masses, I have a feeling Tracy's going to get like, what the hell was she talking about? Should I even say that? I just said the H word. But my opinion is you don't want to wait too long for HR and legal counsel. Legal counsel gets really expensive, right? If you're calling your attorney every time you have an HR conundrum. I don't have a good answer for that. I'm sorry. I know that if you go to the SHRM website, Society of Human Resources Management, like they recommend basically 1 HR professional to every 150 to 170 employees. And that's how I know we do a lot of our metrics here. So we have 751 employees. We have basically 5 HR professionals at Stella, and then we have a support person from Mercy. So 6 into that kind of wraps that up. But if you have under 150 employees, is it time for an HR person? I'll tell you, Mercy Ridge has 1.5 FTEs and they have like 220, 250 employees. So, I would say once you're over 120, 100 employees, you probably need an HR professional. And having a remote person, and I don't know what your line of business is, if you're running a facility or if you're running a community-based operation like a home care division. But if you're running a nursing home or assisted living or something like that, it is so important to be with the people. HR needs to be a part of the team. They need to sit at the table. They need to be in meetings. They need to be a strategic partner on leadership teams. They shouldn't just be like the person you call because you need to order up more staff. HR really should have a strategic voice at the table. So a lot of companies have taken a long time to get there, and that's to their detriment. You really want HR to show their value. When I got here, the HR team was for 65 years sat in the basement, and half of the team here loved it because we're right by the employee entrance, and you could hear everything during shift change. So you could be right on top of issues. You could hear kerfuffles in the hallway. You could hear murmurings about money and raises and strife, and some people loved it, and other people didn't like it because you're in the basement, there's no natural light. It was really not a good motivator for some people that needed that sort of a little bit better space. So, but when I got here, they lived in the basement all the time. Like they never left the basement. They didn't go to meetings. It was like they weren't invited out of the dungeon or something. So I said to the executive team, HR needs to be strategic business partners with all of the business lines. HR should be going to some of the nursing meetings, because nursing department was half of our staff. Over 400 people were in nursing for long-term care here. HR should be at anything that's strategic related. Even when we built out McNally, our new subacute rehab center, I made it a point to tell the executive team that I would be in a lot of those meetings, because you need to understand how the staffing ratios are going to change. You need to understand how the training is going to be done, all new systems, all new floor plans. When I'm recruiting, especially when the pandemic hit, I can't show anyone the building. So I gotta be a part of all the visuals so I can paint a picture. Tracy can speak to that really well, because from an admission standpoint, she's got to paint that picture all the time. We weren't even able to do tours when we opened a brand new beautiful building. So HR needs to be strategic. They need to be in meetings. They need to be involved. And when you're running a center, whatever that center is, AL, IL, skilled, they need to be in the building. Working from home 1 or 2 days a week, maybe, but in the building the majority of the time. You got to be with the people. And one of the great things that I've been able to say, as well as my colleagues on the executive team during the pandemic, is we worked shoulder to shoulder with the GNAs and the housekeepers and the dining workers. And there have been times when we had to test every employee because there's an outbreak, and I'm going floor to floor with a cart. It's very important to demonstrate to the staff that we're in this together. And you can't do that remotely. So I don't have a good answer for what's the magic number of needing the HR person. Just don't wait too long. I think it's an important part of your leadership team.
Thank you.
I'm not an HR specialist by any means, but I would venture to say that if your gut is telling you to ask the question, it probably means it's time to look into it.
Thank you, Crystal. This is Amy. I appreciate you kind of sharing that information, because I'm probably in the minority here. My practice is 10 employees. So, I've certainly had to handle some HR issues, and recently shared with Tracy that I had an employee who was remote, and she was in within the 90-day probationary period, but just stopped doing what she was responsible for doing, just stopped showing up, just stopped responding to text and messaging, etc. And when I finally got a hold of her, she had shared that she had taken another position full time, which was fine. I just wish she would have communicated that clearly. So, I think looking back, I gave her above and beyond chances. I kept trying to make it work. I offered different compromises, different responsibilities and roles, et cetera. But in the end, there was really no response from her at all. So I did end up severing our relationship. So for someone that's in a position like myself, where I don't think I will ever be at that 150 employee place, we're a mobile speech therapy practice. So, what would you recommend? I mean, I do have a healthcare attorney, but certainly I don't want to do that each time there's an HR.
Certainly when you have less than 100 employees, it's challenging. That's why I said I don't know if there's a magic number. I can tell you what SHRM recommends with regards to X amount of employees equals one professional. And that also includes like your benefit specialist, your HR assistant, your recruiter. They kind of just pull it all together. And what I would say for you, Amy, is you should be a SHRM member. You should be a member of the Society of Human Resources Management. I live in a county that's very agricultural and smaller, and it's a large county, but small from a population standpoint. And I serve on some chapters for SHRM. I have in the past. And when I go to these county meetings, the number one thing I say is if you're running a small, whether it's a mom and pop or a business, if you don't have the resources or the numbers to validate the expense of an HR person, you should belong to SHRM. That's a national chain. And then they have memberships in the state of Maryland. And then they have even memberships in counties. So that way you're staying on the forefront of legal changes and of retention recommendations. The membership, and I'm going to just say this off the top of my head, it's like $200 or something a year. I mean, it's, to me, value added, because then you got access to their entire website, a networking opportunity. They do excellent conferences. That to me is your number one thing you should consider doing.
Thank you so much. I didn't even know they existed. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, Society of Human Resources Management, SHRM, and they're the largest. There's others, but they're the largest. Well, I got to stop saying these things as if I have data in front of me since I'm being recorded. They are one of the largest, if not the largest, HR networks in the country. And then there's a Maryland chapter. And then there are sometimes the county chapters wax and wane because it's like voluntary and, people get busy, and Baltimore has a chapter. Carroll County had one at one point. I'm not 100% sure if they still do. HOCO has an active chapter, Howard County. So then you can be a part of the bigger picture, and you can hear about these big legislative things happening, what to do when Maryland goes to $15 an hour. I mean, and then you're kind of preparing for these big things, but then you can also network locally, and you build relationships with local people that you can just pick up the phone and call and say, hey, I'm having a kerfuffle with some staff. Can you get together for coffee and talk about it? So SHRM, I would say.
Perfect. And Crystal, just a quick time check. I'd say another 15 minutes or so.
Okay. Do I have any other questions in the chat room?
This is Christina. Mm-hmm. I have a question. I'm from Upper Chesapeake, and I have, had teams that have reported to me for many years, a couple of decades now, getting close to. But one thing I think we always try to be flexible with our team, and I've found that has helped with retention and everything. But sometimes team members ask for things that you just can't do and continue to operate your business. So could you talk a little bit about boundary setting with team members and sort of how to be supportive, but also set boundaries?
Mm-hmm. I can talk about it. It's definitely one of those things that's hard to just put an answer to. It's not a black and white situation. Like I said, people are gray. Had a situation this week where I got an email from some of our home care leadership, because word on the street is, Hopkins just did a 3% retention increase for their home care nurses, and they're still doing annual increases as well. And, I got the email as well as the HR team here and the VP that oversees this department. And you have several options when you read things like that. You can react, You can go, oh my God, what are we going to do now? Or you can just let it breathe. So the first thing I always tell people, and Tracy knows this, I say at meetings all the time, like, you need to let that breathe. Our biggest mistake when we're confronted making rounds in the hallway or traveling from site to site is trying to give people immediate gratification in the moment. And we can talk ourselves into a pit that we can't climb out of if we do that. So when people approach me when I'm rounding about, agencies are paying G&As $24 an hour and we're paying X here at Stella, what are you going to do for me? I say, and let me look into that. Let me let that breathe for a second. But sometimes I say things like, well, when the average rate of pay for our G&As here is X, and when you combine 30% of benefits on top of that, we're above what that agency is. So education is a big piece too. I think that the more you know your business and you can be prepared for some of those kind of what about me or benefits or perk questions, the better. So that has helped out some in some focus group meetings to say, I hear you, but did you think about it this way? It also astounds me how many hourly employees don't know how to read their paycheck. And it's not because it's difficult to read. They really don't even know what they're making half the time. Because in healthcare, you've got your base pay, you've got your differential pay if you work 3 to 11, you've got this pay if you work 3 to 11 on a weekend. And by the time it's done, it's said and done, their pay is exponentially more than what they actually think it is. So education around some of this is important. As it relates to that Hopkins story, letting it breathe. Once I had sat here in one of don't tell them, but in one of the HFAM sessions, multitasking, I ran a report to actually see the average wage of our home care nurses, and then I pulled the MHHRA. Amy is another great network to be a part of. They're a group in Maryland that primarily does compensation and benefit reviews. And their salary surveys for small companies, I would say, are expensive. For larger, mid-sized to larger companies, it's value added. But that network is good to be a part of because they put some data together from participating organizations where you can see the average rate of pay for ICU nurse in the state of Maryland, and whatever, 30 entities participated. And you can start making some decisions for your own organization, like, well, that's the average here, that's the average there. Do I want to do a market adjustment? Do I not? Oh, look, we're good. Oh, look, we're bad. And how you want to flex yourself for that. But getting back to the direct question, I think sometimes we have to put the what about me and you're not doing enough or you didn't do this on pause. Other times I think we need to address and shut it down in the moment through education appropriately. What we don't want to do is we're not doing that. I've got a couple of leadership people here that immediately, we're not doing that. It's like, stop telling the staff that. First of all, you're not the final decision maker. Second of all, I want people to be heard right now while we're dealing with these very, very stressful staffing challenges. Sometimes, even if you can't give them an answer, just the fact that you took the time to listen to the concern is huge. And maybe not now, but maybe tomorrow. Maybe not now, but maybe next fiscal year. Maybe not now, but maybe next quarter. Maybe not now, but maybe if our volumes go here and I can look at the revenue against expenses, maybe next month. So we don't want to shut things down immediately. So I guess that's how I would handle those situations. Easier said than done. I have lost staff because we haven't paid enough. I have lost staff because of management issues. I tell you, the one I'm starting to die on the hill for and challenge leadership here is the flexible scheduling. I mean, if one more person tells me that they're leaving because they have now to do some kind of crazy childcare thing, which they can't get here at 7, but they can get here by 8, and we're not working with that, we got a problem. We need to figure that out. So, and I in a nursing home, that's important, 7 to 3, 3 to 11. Okay. We have got to get more creative than that and figure that out, because I'm not losing good caregivers over an hour of schedule time. So, I'm really challenging leadership here on that big time right now, especially for those steady eddies and star performers.
What was the acronym that you had mentioned?
Thank you.
The other group started with an M.
MHHRA. Oh my gosh, Maryland
Yeah.
Healthcare Human Resources Association.
Putting it in the chat. A few folks wanted it.
Okay, I think we're down to 10 minutes or less. So just, and the good thing is I'm just about there. So retention during pandemic times. And again, there's no pie in the sky answer. The best thing we can do right now for our staff is being present, available, and showing up for them too, you know. There's going to be challenge. I don't have answers for all the challenges. I mean, I'm doing a presentation for Mercy next week. And when I looked at the agenda for the 2-day meeting, like staffing it's a hot topic for hospitals. It's all of us. And it's a real struggle, but we have to try to create a culture of calm, which is challenging in long-term care. You know, if you have an outbreak tomorrow, it's like, oh my God, visitation is awry. Don't admit, Tracy. I mean, it's like up, down, up. The pendulum swings so dramatically in moments. But you would think after 20 months, we could have, we've definitely found the humor in some of it, although, you know, you're not supposed to say that because it's a very dangerous and serious issue with COVID, but you got to survive it too. And you got to have some humor, but you have to create a culture of calm. Responding versus reacting is always the way to go. I can't say I'm a human being too. I react sometimes, but we have to respond. That's why when I say let it breathe, you'll come back with fresh set of eyes on dealing with some of these things. So give them a timeout if they need it. If there's a difficult or challenging situation, give yourself a timeout if you need it. Clear your head, put your thoughts together, give them space to breathe. And remember that managers are human as well. Employees need to feel safe and cared for, physically, emotionally, financially. So we do have to keep looking at salaries. So we're not going to compete. I've told people in these situations, the person that asked me about being confronted with some stuff, I've told people flat out, we're not competing with agencies, right? I want to compete with other organizations like us. I don't want to compete with agencies. And I know we offer a benefit package. It's awesome. And let me tell you why I think you should care about health insurance. And let me tell you about how you can help yourself get a raise. Have you heard of our tuition and reimbursement program? What are you doing to help yourself get a raise? So those discussions of, I'm going to do something, but what are you doing too? And that's the partnership discussion, right? They're stressed out in their communities. They're stressed out about their kids and families. We need to recognize all that. Caring for the caregiver is not an overrated topic at all, because I'm a caregiver everywhere. Whether you're taking care of your mom, your dad, your kids, your community, your church, you're a caregiver. Delegate decision-making back to the frontline worker. This is huge. We micromanage way too much. It's like we don't trust people. We have to start trusting our staff to make some decisions. And maybe the frontline worker for you is your field managers. The frontline worker for us could be a lead housekeeper. Refocus on employment engagement. We talked about surveys. I think it is important to do them. I think if I had 10 employees, Amy, I would probably talk to a network about what they're doing. You could probably get away with doing a SurveyMonkey tool, which will cost you $25 a month to have a membership with SurveyMonkey. And you can still do it anonymously. And maybe anonymously means that you remove yourself and you have someone like Tracy or Gina or me, or someone, hey, I've asked someone on my gate association to administer this survey. The email is going to come from someone else. They're going to analyze the data. It's completely anonymous. So getting creative on that engagement piece. Re-engage your top talent. This is my favorite part of my new job. Who do I have in-house that could do more for us and tap that energy and pay a little more, and grow our bench strength? I can tell you right now, this executive team here, which was much bigger when I started, and now it's a team of like 2.5. It was a team of 7, 11 years ago. We're doing way too much of the day-to-day stuff. And we have talent here we need to leverage more. And that only makes people feel more committed to you and more important to your organization by giving them a little bit more and trusting them to run things for you a little bit. But when you do that and you take your hands off the wheel and the car starts to swerve or you get car sick, you cannot be upset about it because you want to challenge your team. You have to say, why am I in the back seat? I'm getting car sick reading my phone. You might have to put things on pause and regroup. But if you're letting go of the wheel, you got to let go of the wheel. You can still put the map out there they have to follow, but you got to let them do the journey and they'll get you there. So meaningful one-on-ones are important with people. Stretch assignments need to come back. We used that term so long ago in HR, stretch assignments. It's like talent management 101, but that's what builds your bench strength. Trusting your frontline staff, your managers, and especially your directors to do more for your organization. Training. Training's never overrated either. And I'll tell you, it's laxed for us since the pandemic, right? So our highest turnout, we hired 112 people in the first quarter of fiscal 22. So July, August, September, 112 people we hired. We lost 89 people in that time frame. 33% of those 89 were those new hires of the 112. That is significant. Amy, your story about the person being in 90 days and starting not to show up and why are you not communicating? Half of management right now is like, where did they go? Where are they at? Where are they? So why are they? That happens in interviews too, by the way. But it's just a reality. I will say this, if you don't see the best in someone right out of the gate, you never will. You can teach skills, behaviors are different. If you're not seeing the behavior you want right away, then fire fast. Get it over with. Because otherwise, after 90 days, if you do have an HR team, they're going to make you document the heck out of it. So fire quickly in 90 days. Focus on diversity and inclusion. I would not be a good leader nor a good previous HR person if I didn't say diversify your teams as much as possible. And I'm talking about everything from culture to diversity of thought. Diversity comes in many shapes and forms. It's not just the obvious things. Those things are hugely important for your teams, but diversity of thought. Who's going to make me think differently? Who's going to open my eyes up? And then making sure the key to the kingdom, I think, is flexibility. And I already talked about that with scheduling, but how else? The elephant in the room is management burnout. If you have larger teams, please stay focused on your managers too. I send out emails when I get inspired by a photograph or something else and say, who's being mindful today? Who stopped and smelled the roses? Yesterday, my email was, and I don't do it daily because it won't be meaningful if I did it daily. I do it when it strikes me. But yesterday I sent out a caregiver prayer. We are a mission-driven organization where prayer is one of our pillars. Because when I drove in, the harvest sunrise was amazing. And I actually looked at it and saw it. I didn't just get into work, get my temperature checked, get to my desk with my mask on. I looked at the sunrise and I wanted people to know the leadership here is stopping and pausing. Are you? Because you have to look at things with fresh eyes and you have to take care of yourself. October, in addition to all the other things, Alzheimer Awareness Month, Breast Cancer, is also Emotional Wellness Month. Are you checking in with your caregiver? So be mindful of your management team because that's the elephant in the room is management burnout right now. Partnering for the greater good, listen to the challenge, problem solve, don't promise, like I said in the hallway or rounding or when you're going to your field operations. When someone does approach you with a what about me or why aren't we doing this, don't make promises you definitely can't keep. You'll lose credibility. There's nothing authentic in that. Promote from within, bench strength we talked about, delegate and trust we talked about, being present, round and check in. Even with a team of 10, Amy can check in weekly with all these folks on her team. Building bench strength, I've already talked about this. I am fast tracking now. I apologize. I'm sorry. Create a culture of growth and development. Your policy states your position. For us, that means that when we have an opportunity for growth, I created a new VP position, I created a new director position, or I have turnover and we post internally for 1 week first. Everyone in-house gets the opportunity to put their name in the hat before anyone externally is even talked to. And that is important. Your policy states your position on what you really believe about growth and development. First option, promote from within if you can. If not, bring in that extra set of eyes from the outside, shake it up a little. Transparency is important. Hey, we're looking outside for this position. Thank you all for applying, but here's why we're going in that direction. Don't hide from what you really believe is your true north where this is concerned. Create policies that promote promotion and get back to basics. If there's something you want to develop in a person, pay for it. We don't have training dollars. Okay, well, you also don't have dollars to waste on turnover. That's a whole nother session, how much turnover costs, right? For everything from the hiring process and people's time invested in interviews to training to, how many clients you can't touch because that person's not here. admissions you can't do because that person's not here. You can't afford not to pay for a class that's $199, period. So develop. Job shadowing is a huge way too to create development. Let people try other things. I had a discussion point in here, and any other retention strategies that you all think of that I haven't thought of. This is a good network to share them in. So I hope that you are emailing each other and sharing those things. I'm sorry I fast tracked at the end there. I'm very passionate about caring for the caregiver and taking care of employees. It's why I had to think long and hard when I was approached about pursuing my license, because my passion is really the people. But you can't be an executive director or run your own company if you don't care about your staff, right? Your staff and your client, they have to go like this. Anyway, so I apologize if I talk too long, but I appreciate being asked to do this. I hope you found a nugget or some value out of what we talked about today. If you email Tracy and want the fact behind the words, I can pull up some stuff from the HFAM conferences I quoted this. I can also pull up some stuff on SHRM and send it out to Amy, to Tracy to send to Amy and the rest of the team. I can find the current chair for MHHRA. We are a system of acronyms, that's for sure. But thank you very much. Appreciate being asked to do this. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you for being here, Crystal. Any other just last questions? We do have some time. I'm seeing great comments, great feedback in the chat box, Crystal, so thank you. Any other just last minute questions? We certainly have time. We can stay on as long as we'd like. And I do want everyone to have a chance to network with each other as well. Any questions for Crystal? She is a wealth of information. Everybody need another cup of coffee?
No, I was very impressed. I thought it was an excellent discussion, and I've learned a lot from it. And I thank you. Your experience and your management style is very impressive. And I just think you're right on with what we're dealing with right now in the country and in the healthcare industry alone. I know I work in the assisted living communities. I work with them by doing placements. They're struggling to keep employees. They're struggling to find good quality employees that they can afford and keep them. So they're in a whole nother, well, not that much dissimilar to what you are dealing with as well. They need healthcare employees, you know, GNAs, CNAs, med techs, and they're constantly being outbidded price-wise. And it's mostly the small assisted livings that are really challenged. I'm sure the larger ones are too, but all the small ones are really challenged with that right now.
I have a quick question. I'm a small law firm. We had 10 people. We needed to get rid of a difficult employee. We made the decision on a Friday. We had a psych issue over the weekend. And when she got to work on Monday, she presented with, I need this, I need that. And it was at that point too late. We couldn't, from an employment law standpoint, couldn't get rid of her. So that was a challenge for us. Eventually, it took 6 months for her to get back to normal. And then we were able to do it, but we couldn't do it when we wanted to because we waited too late.
Yeah.
We should have done it the week before.
Yeah. Yeah. ADA accommodations, or ADAAA now, as you know, it's a longer acronym in the last few years. They are, can pose challenges. I've seen a myriad of different things. Definitely people that need the help, and they need to, losing their income at that time would exacerbate an already huge issue, which could have created a longer term legal conundrum for you. So handling it the way you did was really appropriate. I see that here too. I've seen it many times. Some managers are like, now they need this. And it's like, well, the whole point is to evaluate whether or not the accommodation is reasonable. So let's talk it through. But yeah, like I said, in the first 90 days, if you don't see the best in someone's behaviorally, I'm not sure you will. Like we can train on skills, right? Although some days I wonder about that too. But fire fast if you can. It's hard right now, though. We are, I don't want to say we're lowering our standards, but we have given a lot of grace since the pandemic started, because we're trying to meet people where they are, especially those long-term employees who are really good or burning out. But even some of the short-term ones that were like, we really don't want to let this person go yet. So until we absolutely have to, but nothing is easy when dealing with the staff right now. It's very, and your manager. So keep that in mind too. Like I said, manager burnout is a thing. They're stepping in in the larger organizations, they're stepping in as staff and manager. So some of our nurse managers are RNs right now because we're hiring staff. But it's interesting because we're not as challenged hiring the licensed staff. So nurses we're getting. It's really the frontline worker, truly the GNA, the housekeeper, the dining worker. That is our biggest challenge right now, is anyone who can compete with us at the same salaries. It really, I tell you what, it calls to the forefront how, I don't know what the right term is, but nationally, how we've really have valued the work of a CNA, GNA. They have the single most person-to-person contact with your patients and residents. And yet, as a society, we've deemed this as, in the middle of the country, these are people making $9 an hour, you know?
Yeah.
And here we're working to get them to 15, and agencies are now paying them 24 and then charging us 36. So it's like, how do you get around some of this? So it is a struggle. Talking about it like this is helpful, though. I think when we know we're all in it together and we can kind of problem solve and brainstorm and, hey, did you think about this? I think that's really important. It's really important.
And that's exactly how this came to be. You know, Heather, myself, Amy, a few others were together. We were talking about an issue that one of us was having, and Heather and I looked at each other and said, we need to get an HR specialist to present and just start a really meaningful conversation. And about a month later, Amy had a real life situation that she was dealing with. And it's like, I have to reach out to Crystal because she would be the perfect person to really dive into this for us. And this is ongoing. You know, I can see us doing this again in a year or 6 months and saying, hey, let's revisit how have things changed. And I could not agree more with the pandemic. You know, at some point, you just want to stop talking about COVID being the reason for everything and just find a new normal and move forward. But it's still difficult. But having the conversations, opening the dialogue, being vulnerable with each other is so important. We are absolutely in this together.
Yeah, I agree. And I just want to say, Crystal, really quickly that I appreciate you sharing all the resources for smaller businesses like myself, because how you shared it makes it much more approachable. You know, and prior, I just was thinking, you know, I'll never be at that place. So I don't even know where to begin. It seemed a little overwhelming and intimidating. So I really appreciate your, you know, start here, do this from a planning purpose.
Yeah, there's 9 times out of 10, there's not the perfect answer, but like, that's what I was saying. Sometimes when I go to these sessions myself, if I get one like aha moment out of it, I didn't think about that way, or I knew that already and I forgot about that, I feel like I got some value out of it. That's why we should never say we don't have time for training and development and networking, because it's huge. When I participated for a couple years on the Baltimore County Workforce Board through the county, that opened up so much opportunity to just talk, and not necessarily with other healthcare people, although I did meet some great people from Genesis. So that was really, we commiserated together over very similar issues, but just even people in the county. And I had an issue with the bus line once, because we're very blessed. We have the MTA comes right to our property. We had an issue with that because I was on that workforce development committee. I was able to get connected more personally to the NTA and not just talk to a voicemail system. I mean, networking is again, it's never overrated. So it's so important. So kudos to you all for putting this together. And if anyone has, Amy, you or any of the smaller businesses ever want to like shoot Tracy something, let me disclaimer me, I'm not an attorney. You should talk to an attorney. But if you ever want to brainstorm something, shoot it to Tracy. I'm happy to do that. I actually find a lot of joy in it, honestly. So, and I'll get something else out of it as well. Happy to support the cause. We're in it together. You're 100% right. Whoever said that. Yes, there's some competition that has to happen between our organizations. That has to happen. But with the people stuff, I feel like we're all better off if and so many of us share staff too. We're all better off if we're on the same page with a lot of things we're talking through.